we move on to react to Pep Guardiola. He has agreed to a new contract to stay at Manchester City and end speculation that he will be leaving Manchester City at the end of the season. That speculation is over. He has extended his contract for 1 more year, so we wait till, next season to have these is Guardiola gonna stay, is he not conversations all over again. But yeah, he's extended his contract to 1 more year after this season. And yeah, it's there was some uncertainty around Manchester City with these next couple of months with the trial and all the charges and everything of that sort. But you know what has not been uncertain is Pep Guardiola's constant belief that, or at least his the way he's made it seem that his belief that City has done nothing wrong, that these are all just allegations, and all of them are inaccurate, and he's been very forthcoming on the whole notion that if City are actually guilty of any of these, that that he will immediately leave the club. There's no way about it, and he does not stand for that and all that. And well, look, he's had a sustained dominance at Manchester City like no other, and it was, by the way, it was only his choice to make. I just want to say the obvious. Obviously there was no planet that City, there was no universe, there was no galaxy, there was no nothing that City, wanted to go into a different direction or had to think about it or anything like that. It was, it was his decision on whether or not that he wanted to stay at Manchester City or not. Maybe he wanted to rest from football. Jurgen Klopp has went that route. Maybe he wanted to see his side, take his sides more into the international management field. With the World Cup coming up in America, we saw what Mauricio Pochettino did, and deciding to go from club football to managing international football and take on the U.S. men's national team. Maybe he wanted to do something like that where he could also get that little bit of rest and not having to deal with the day-to-day of being a manager, rather than do work international window by international window. But Guardiola, he wants to stay in Manchester City, and he has some work to do this season. With Manchester City does, they find themselves in a difficult position in the Premier League. I have to say, not a position that they haven't been in. I think City, they've done this before against the same opposition in Liverpool. Right now they're down 5 points through 11 games. They've made up wider gaps than that. But it is tricky with how they've looked of late. They've have 4 straight defeats. And maybe that also adds to the feel of Manchester City. When you're constantly winning, at least for me, as a fan, when you're constantly winning championships and you're always the best team, game in, game out, it comes a little bit hard to get motivated to continue to give everything your all, give 100%, put in the work for that next trophy, because you've won 7 million of them already. And the way that Guardiola keeps this Manchester City team hungry and focused and motivated year in and year out, despite how they win the Premier League the last 3 years, they battle for the 4th Premier League title like it's their first one. How they say, live every day like your last. Under Pep Guardiola, this City team performs every season like it's their first, and there's no complacency with them. Even with these 4 losses, I don't think the problem was complacency. I think they just got done away by Sporting Lisbon in a tough atmosphere. They lost to Bournemouth in a interesting game. Bournemouth just had that little bit of quality to take advantage of the chances they come. And that Brighton game was, a little bit of a smash and grab way to get that victory. And for Brighton after City they had a control in the lead of most of the game. But yeah, City they're an amazing team. They have great talent. I would like to see what Pep Guardiola decides to do in terms of countering the Ballon d'Or winner winning the ACL. How they balance that. A lot of people have blamed that for their four losses and how it's that loss has made it a little bit easier for Manchester City opponents to play through that in midfield. They lack that physical grit and that defensive nature of you know of Rodri being in there. You can put in Kovacic in there to sit next to um, Gundogan, but but when you're physically, whenever you're physically just getting dominated in that area, it makes it difficult, and I think that loss that they have with Rodri, it's a big loss because I don't think Kovacic on his own can make up for the defensive capabilities of Rodri in midfield, but also the way he can dictate the tempo and pace of the game. I don't think Kovacic could do it at that level, but I think City are going to be able to adapt, and they've always been able to adapt to key injuries and all that under Guardiola. I just think this one is a little bit more tricky, but it's still something that definitely I have full faith and confidence in Pep Guardiola to be able to, sort out, the loss of Rodri and this four-game fixture list. And also Guardiola, you know, he does a great job of doing mind games, saying, after that game, he said maybe it's time for another team to win the Premier League. We can't win it every year. Mind games at its finest. And I don't think there's many sports, especially leagues out there that where managers do more mind games than in the Premier League. Especially back then with Sir Alex Ferguson, Rafa Benitez, and the crew. They love these little sound bites in the pressers to leave some sort of thought in the reporters' minds. Or not reporters' minds, but the opposing, whether it's the opposing team, sometimes it's the opposing managers. They try to get a leg up through these press conferences, and for me, that's crazy. And sometimes it works too. Sometimes certain managers, like Sir Alex Ferguson, you remember the Sir Alex Ferguson versus Rafa Benitez sort of back and forth that they had at the in the press conferences. It was Rafa Benitez almost taking the bait of something Sir Alex Ferguson said that led him to come and do a whole presentation on why Sir Alex Ferguson was wrong. I forgot exactly what they were arguing about, but he lost the composure there, and I think when it comes to the football on the pitch, that eventually matters. Composure is a very important thing, and